They say success tastes sweetest when served with a side of vindication. Standing in my corner office 50 floors above Manhattan, watching my parents squirm in the VIP lounge below through the security feed, I finally understood what that meant. My name is Maya Tren, and I am the CEO of Aerolux, the most exclusive private aviation company on the East Coast. The contract I just signed this morning was worth $50 million. But it wasn't the money that made my hands steady as I signed my name. It was the knowledge that the two people who once called me their greatest disappointment were about to learn exactly what their daughter had become. But let me start from the beginning, because every victory story needs its villain origin tale. Growing up as the daughter of David and Helen Trun was like living in a house made of glass expectations, where every move was scrutinized and found wanting. My parents owned Dynasty Voyages, a mid-tier travel agency that specialized in what they called luxury experiences, but what I recognized even as a teenager as overpriced package deals sold to people who didn't know better. They had built their entire identity around appearing successful, and I was expected to be their crown jewel, their proof that they had made it in America. The dinner table was our battlefield. Every evening, over my mother's meticulously prepared Vietnamese dishes, they would dissect my day like surgeons looking for cancer. Why wasn't I in the advanced math class like the Kim's daughter? Why hadn't I joined the debate team, like the neighbor's son? Why did I insist on pursuing aerospace engineering when I could be studying business to help expand the family company? "You're being selfish, Maya," my mother would say, her voice sharp as the porcelain chopsticks she wielded like weapons. "We didn't sacrifice everything to come to this country so you could chase fantasies about flying machines. We need you to think about family, about legacy." My father was more direct in his disappointment. "Your little airplane dreams won't pay the bills," he'd grunt from behind his newspaper. "Helen is right. You need to be practical. This family business could be worth millions if you applied yourself properly, instead of wasting time with those engineering books." I graduated summa cum laude from MIT with a degree in aerospace engineering, but they didn't attend my graduation ceremony. They were too busy entertaining what my father called a potential major client, who turned out to be some middle manager from a local hotel chain looking for group rates. That night, alone in my dorm room, I made a promise to myself that I would prove them wrong, not to win their approval, but to show them exactly what they had dismissed. After graduation, I took a position with a small startup called Aerolux. It was barely more than an idea then, just 3 passionate engineers and a former pilot who believed we could revolutionize private aviation. My parents' reaction was swift and brutal. "You're breaking my heart," my mother sobbed dramatically when I told them about the job. "I raised you, paid for the best schools, sacrificed my own dreams, and this is how you repay me? Working for some company that's going to fold in 6 months?" My father was even worse. "Don't you dare tell anyone you're our daughter," he said, his face red with embarrassment. "This family doesn't have failures. If you want to throw your life away on some startup nonsense, you do it without our name attached to it." That was the last conversation we had for 8 years. I left their house that night with a single suitcase and the unshakable determination to make them regret every word they'd ever said to me. Aerolux grew slowly at first, then exponentially. I threw myself into the work with the fury of someone who had everything to prove and nothing to lose. While my former classmates were climbing corporate ladders at established companies, I was building my own ladder, rung by rung. I learned every aspect of the business, from aircraft maintenance to federal regulations to the delicate art of managing ultra-wealthy clients who expected perfection and paid handsomely for it. By the time I was 28, I had been promoted to vice president of operations. By 30, I was chief operating officer. And last year, when our founder decided to retire to spend time with his grandchildren, I became CEO of a company worth over $200 million. The irony wasn't lost on me that I had built exactly the kind of luxury service business my parents had always dreamed of, except mine actually worked. Which brings me to yesterday morning, when my assistant knocked on my office door with an expression that meant trouble. "Ms. Tren," she said carefully, "I have a somewhat unusual request for a meeting. Dynasty Voyages wants to arrange a consultation for one of their VIP clients. They're requesting a sit-down with our highest-level executive to discuss long-term private jet services." The name hit me like ice water. Dynasty Voyages. My parents' company. "And who exactly is this VIP client?" I asked, though I was already reaching for my phone to look up what Dynasty Voyages had become in the years since I'd last thought about them. "A Mr. Marcus Thorne. Apparently, he's looking to arrange exclusive private aviation for his entire corporate fleet." The representative from Dynasty Voyages was quite insistent about the importance of this client. He kept mentioning his connections with previous Aerolux management and demanded to meet with whoever was in charge. I nearly laughed. My father, still name-dropping relationships that had never existed, still trying to leverage importance he didn't possess. Some things never changed. Schedule the meeting for tomorrow afternoon, I told my assistant. Use conference room A, the one with the best view. And don't mention my name or position. I want this to be a surprise. She looked puzzled but nodded. Should I inform them you'll be handling the meeting personally? No, I said, already planning exactly how I wanted this to unfold. Let them assume whatever they want to assume. And make sure they wait. Important clients should never be rushed. That night, I barely slept. 8 years of silence were about to be broken, but not in the way my parents expected. I had learned in business that the most effective negotiations happened when you controlled every variable, when your opponents were off balance and operating with incomplete information. Tomorrow's meeting would be the most important negotiation of my life, and I intended to win decisively. The next afternoon, I watched from my office as a black sedan pulled up to our building. 3 people emerged. A tall, silver-haired man in an expensive suit who had to be Marcus Thorne, and behind him, 2 figures I recognized despite the years that had passed. My parents had dressed in their finest clothes, my mother in a burgundy suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary, my father in a navy blazer that had been tailored to hide the weight he'd gained since I'd last seen him. They looked prosperous but nervous, like actors playing roles they weren't quite comfortable with. I gave them exactly 30 minutes to wait before I made my entrance. When I walked into conference room A, the effect was immediate and devastating. Marcus Thorne looked up expectantly, clearly anticipating whoever was in charge. My father was examining one of our model aircraft displays with an expression of professional interest. My mother was in the middle of what sounded like a well-rehearsed pitch about Dynasty Voyage's connections and expertise. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw me. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone of dismissive authority she had always used with service staff. "We're waiting for the manager. Could you please let them know we're ready to begin?" I walked calmly to the head of the conference table and extended my hand to Marcus Thorne. "Mr. Thorne, I apologize for the delay. I'm Maya Chun, CEO of Aerolux. Thank you for your patience with my parents." The silence that followed was the most satisfying 30 seconds of my life. I watched the recognition dawn on their faces, saw my father's mouth open and close like a fish gasping for air, saw my mother's carefully applied makeup do nothing to hide the shock and embarrassment flooding her features. "You," my father finally managed. When did you become successful?" I finished for him, settling into my chair with the calm confidence of someone who held all the cards. "About 7 years ago, Dad. Right around the time you told me not to use your name, because this family doesn't have failures." Marcus Thorne's eyebrows had risen during this exchange, but he remained diplomatically silent. I could see him reassessing the situation, probably wondering what kind of family dynamics he'd walked into. Just as I began to open my presentation folder, the conference room door opened again. Ethan Vance walked in without knocking, his signature smirk already in place. "Marcus," he said, completely ignoring the rest of us. "Sorry I'm running late. Traffic was murder. I hope you haven't made any hasty decisions about your fleet services before hearing what Prestige Jets can offer." Ethan had been my biggest rival since our startup days. Where Aerolux focused on safety, reliability, and genuine luxury, Prestige Jets was all flash and aggressive marketing. He had tried to poach my clients for years, usually unsuccessfully, but he had a talent for showing up at the worst possible moments. He turned to me with that same condescending smile I remembered from industry conferences. "Maya-chan. Still playing in the big leagues, I see. Though I have to wonder if Mr. Thorne here knows about Aerolux's current legal troubles." My blood went cold. "What legal troubles?" "Oh, you haven't heard?" Ethan's smile widened. "The FAA received an anonymous complaint about some irregularities in your maintenance records. Nothing proven yet, of course, but they've opened an investigation. Funny how these things surface right when you're trying to land new clients." The words hit the room like a bomb. Marcus Thorne's expression shifted from polite interest to concern. My parents exchanged glances that looked less like surprise and more like guilt, and I felt the ground shift beneath my feet in a way it hadn't since the day I'd left home with a single suitcase. "That's impossible," I said, but even as I spoke, I was mentally reviewing our maintenance protocols, trying to figure out where such a complaint could have originated. "I'm afraid I'll need to postpone this decision until these matters are cleared up," Marcus said, standing. "I can't risk associating my company with any regulatory issues." After he left, followed by Ethan's triumphant smirk, I was alone with my parents for the first time in 8 years. The reunion was not going as I had planned. Well, my mother said, her voice recovering some of its old authority. I hope you're satisfied. Your reckless business practices have embarrassed this entire family. But I wasn't listening to her anymore. I was thinking about anonymous complaints and maintenance records and wondering how Ethan Vance could have known about an FAA investigation before I did. I was thinking about insider information and the timing of this meeting and the guilty look that had passed between my parents when Ethan dropped his bombshell. I need to make some calls, I said, standing abruptly. This meeting is over. That night, my team and I worked until dawn. Our head of compliance pulled every maintenance record, every inspection report, every piece of documentation the FAA could possibly want to see. Our IT director traced the digital footprint of the anonymous complaint that had triggered the investigation. And slowly, piece by piece, a picture emerged that made my stomach turn. The complaint had been submitted from an IP address registered to Dynasty Voyages. Someone with access to our internal systems had leaked carefully edited versions of our maintenance logs, altered to suggest irregularities that didn't actually exist. The fingerprints of corporate espionage were everywhere, and they all pointed back to my parents' company. But the worst part was what our cybersecurity audit revealed. The leaked information had come from inside Aerolux, from someone with legitimate access to our systems. Someone had been feeding information to Dynasty Voyages for months, helping them understand our client base, our pricing strategies, our operational vulnerabilities. The betrayal was complete. My parents hadn't just failed to support my success, they had actively tried to sabotage it. At 6 a.m, I drove to the address I found listed for Dynasty Voyages. It was a shabby office complex in Queens, nothing like the prestigious Manhattan location they'd always dreamed of. I found them both there, hunched over coffee and computers, looking like they'd been awake all night too. We need to talk, I said, walking into their office without knocking. My father looked up with the expression of a man who'd been caught red-handed. Maya, we can explain. Can you? I set my laptop on their desk and turned the screen toward them. Because I have digital forensics that show someone from this office submitted a false complaint to the FAA. I have evidence of corporate espionage and trade secret theft. I have proof that you've been working with Ethan Vance to try to destroy the company I built. My mother's face had gone pale, but she still tried to maintain her defiance. If you had helped your family instead of abandoning us, none of this would have been necessary. Helped you? I stared at her in disbelief. By giving up my dreams to prop up a failing business? By pretending your mediocre travel agency was some kind of empire worth sacrificing my future for? Dynasty Voyages is struggling, my father admitted quietly. We're behind on everything. The lease, employee salaries, supplier payments. We owe the bank almost $2 million. When we heard about your success, we thought, you thought you'd destroy me rather than ask for help. I closed my laptop and stood up. You thought you'd rather see me fail than admit you were wrong about me. We were desperate, my mother said, and for the first time in my life, I heard something like vulnerability in her voice. Everything we built was falling apart. We needed that Thorn contract to survive. I looked around their dingy office, at the water stains on the ceiling and the outdated computers and the stacks of unpaid bills partially hidden under other papers. This was what they had chosen over having a successful daughter. This was the empire they had wanted me to sacrifice my dreams for. You're right about one thing, I said finally. Everything you built is falling apart, but that's not my fault, and it's not my responsibility to fix. I walked toward the door, then stopped and turned back. But since you're so interested in the travel industry, I have a proposition for you. Dynasty Voyages owes Bank AmeriCorp $2 million, correct? As of this morning, I own that debt. I bought it for 30 cents on the dollar, which means you now owe me $600,000. The look of shock on their faces was everything I had hoped for, and more. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. You're going to shut down Dynasty Voyages. You're going to liquidate whatever assets you have left. And then you're going to come work for me. Work for you? My father sputtered. I'm expanding Aerolux's ground services division. We need people to handle baggage, coordinate with catering services, manage client transportation. It's honest work, and it pays well enough for you to make payments on your debt. Consider it a chance to learn what the luxury travel industry actually looks like when it's run competently. My mother's face had gone through about 6 different colors. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You wanted so badly to be part of a successful travel company. Now you can be. You'll start Monday morning at 7 a.m. Dress code is business casual, and you'll be reporting to Jennifer Martinez, our ground services manager. She's 26 years old and graduated from community college, so try not to let your egos get in the way of taking direction from her. I paused at the door for one final shot. Oh, and one more thing. Marcus Thorne called this morning. Once I explained the situation and provided proof that the FAA complaint was fraudulent, he was very impressed with how professionally we handled the crisis. Aerolux will be managing his entire corporate fleet exclusively. It's a $12 million annual contract, the largest in our company's history. That was 6 months ago. Marcus Thorne turned out to be exactly the kind of client who appreciates competence and integrity, and his recommendation has led to 3 more major contracts. Aerolux is now the fastest-growing private aviation company on the East Coast, and I've been featured on the cover of Forbes as one of the top female entrepreneurs under 35. My parents show up to work every day at 7 a.m. sharp. My father coordinates ground transportation and has discovered he's actually quite good at logistics when he's not trying to pretend he's more important than he is. My mother handles catering coordination and has found that her attention to detail, which made my childhood miserable, is actually valuable when applied to ensuring our clients' dietary restrictions and preferences are perfectly met. They're not happy about their new circumstances, but they're learning. Last week, my father actually complimented the efficiency of our new scheduling system. My mother sent me a memo with suggestions for improving our catering vendor relationships that were genuinely insightful. We don't talk about the past. We don't have family dinners or heart-to-heart conversations about forgiveness and healing. We have a professional relationship now, which is more honest than anything we ever had when I was growing up. But the strangest thing is that I've stopped thinking about them altogether most days. Building my company, managing my team, serving my clients, growing my business, these things fill my time and give me satisfaction in ways that revenge never could have. I didn't build Aerolux to prove my parents wrong. I built it because I loved aviation and understood luxury service and saw an opportunity to create something excellent. The fact that my success happened to devastate 2 people who spent 18 years telling me I'd never amount to anything, that was just a bonus. Today, as I sit in my corner office reviewing contracts and planning our expansion into the West Coast market, I sometimes catch glimpses of my parents through the building's security cameras. They're professional, punctual, and surprisingly competent in their new roles. They're learning what it means to be part of something larger than their own egos. And I'm learning that the best revenge isn't making your enemies suffer. It's making their opinions irrelevant. My parents spent years trying to convince me I was a disappointment. Now they work for me, and their approval or disapproval literally doesn't matter anymore. I'm Maya Chun, CEO of Aerolux. I don't need anyone's validation to know who I am or what I'm worth. And this success story? It's just the beginning.